Hello, and welcome to designing an object in 3D and then printing it so that you can make something in reality. To begin this workshop or class tutorial, go ahead and go to tinkercad.com. You can see the URL up here in my menu bar. And once you get there, go over to the sign up button and click sign up. Click create personal account and click sign up with email. Go ahead and go through the process here. So you'll put in, I'm just going to put in a fake day and put in a year and hit next. And then you use your KSU email address. So in my case, I'll just put something in here. Okay, and then I have to make a password, and I'll just let it suggest a password for me. Fine. And then I'll hit create account. Okay, so it created an account. I don't want the marketing, and I hit done, so it's super easy. When you arrive, it's going to give you a tutorial. So I'm going to click Let's Go, but keep in mind what's happening here is it's setting me up for a tutorial. This tutorial actually allows me to mess stuff up and make copies and do all kinds of things. I would rather not you go through this. Notice I can hit next and done, and then if I hit reset, it'll actually go back and walk me through the same thing again and teach me how to move around. So to get out of this, click out of this tutorial. So I clicked the upper left. Let's see, start tinkering. Now I'm in my design screen. So do you see how the tutorial is here? I want to click create new design. And this is where I get a space that I can actually navigate on my own. So this makes a big difference. Now I can put my own objects. First thing I want you to do is realize you have this square at the top and you can move the work plane around. This is a representation of the bed of the 3D printer where your object will be built. Okay? And you have to get used to moving around on it. I can also come over here and I can click and then use my mouse to select objects. If I do a 2-finger click on a trackpad or a right click with a mouse, I can rotate around and see the different places. If you have a trackpad and you have 2 fingers, or you use the scroll wheel on a mouse, you can zoom in or zoom out. Okay, so I'm zooming in, zooming out. So it has some intuitive controls that allow you to move around again. So the concept of a brand object is to go ahead and have something that represents a concept of identity. In this case, it might be my brand object. So I can go ahead and start doing that, but first I'm going to change the name of my design, and I'll just call it Dominic Thomas brand. And you could put the date or the class or some other identifying part of the name of your design, but for now I'll just say like that. And I'm going to start with a shape. So the way 3D design works is that you start and you have all these shapes in the palette on the side, and believe it or not, you can import other kinds of things, but we'll start with a basic cube. It needs to be on the work plane. By default it is. And so I can see that if I click here, this thing is 20 millimeters high. If I click this little triangle up here and I move it, do you see it now says 1? It's 1 millimeter off of the work plane now. I want it to stay on the work plane, so it needs to be 0. So by default, when I dragged it in, it was 0. And then we're designing something. In this case, I'm going to design a keychain. So for a keychain, I want it to fit in my pocket, which means I want it to be fairly small. So a lot of keychains we're designing in millimeters, And millimeters means that about 25 millimeters is an inch, so I'll make it about 2 inches wide, or 50 millimeters. So if you noticed, I can click on one of these anchor points of the object, and then these numbers come up, and that allows me to change it. Now I'd rather have it wide rather than tall, so I'm going to switch it back to 20. I'll go down here and switch it to 50, and now I have a box. Now this would not make much of a keychain, because sticking this in my pocket, it would be too tall, so I'm going to shrink it down to about 4 millimeters high. And so now I've got a basic idea, and I'll move it right to the center of the work plane. Get used to moving around on the work plane. Now I can change this thing around to add more info. So for example, maybe I just want to put my initials on here. So I can drag in text from the text tool. Over here it says text, so I can come over and change this to my initials, and I can then move this over. I can rotate the work plane so that I have a good view, and then I can come and shrink it down a little bit and kind of get it right like where I want it, maybe right in here. Now I want you to see that my text is taller than my box. That's good. I want it to protrude so that it will print out and be visible. But it's a little too tall. So my box is 4 millimeters high. I'll make my text 6 millimeters. So it'll have a little bit, it'll be visible, but there I've got it. And so now I've got my text and I've got my box. This thing is not ready to print yet, actually. So I'm going to want to do a few more things to it, because I want you to see a few more concepts in 3D design. This is a good basic tutorial. And in order to print something, you always need to group it so the printer sees it as one object. So this is now one object. There's another thing to think about. So actually for a keychain, you often want to put it onto a holder. So I might want to go ahead and get this cylinder and drag it over here, and it turns out in 3D design you have the option of cutting with shapes as well as adding with shapes. So I added the letters to the box, but I can take this cylinder here, and I'll go ahead and click the up key to kind of move it around a little. So see how it's sticking out? I don't really want it to stick out. I want it to be a hole, and sure enough, I can choose hole over here. When I choose hole, I'm now using a shape to cut another shape. So that's something you can do in 3D design. I'm going to cut this shape with another shape, and in order to cut, it doesn't matter that it's sticking up. It can stick up, that's no problem, because all of that negative space will just disappear. But it has to be taller than the top of this, or it won't cut all the way through. So it has to be taller than the original box, which is 4 millimeters tall. And it is taller than that, so that's good. So now I'm going to select everything, and I'm going to hit group again, and you're going to see when I come up here, I now have a hole. So that's one way I can do it. And so maybe I don't want all these sharp corners in my pocket, right? Because I'm going to be sticking this in my pocket. So I'm going to drag this shape over, called the tube, and I can come over here and maybe choose to set my tube around kind of like that. And see if I can round out my corners a little bit. Like that, maybe like this. That seems okay. And now I'm going to hit hole, right? And then I'm going to select all. And I'm going to go ahead, and now I have some rounded corners on my keychain. I've grouped it, and I could then move further. And just like anything else, I'll just point this out to you, but if I were to go back here and ungroup everything, and then I can ungroup it again and ungroup it again, And if I go back to my letters, I can actually use my letters to cut too. But keep in mind, if I cut with the letters, in my name I've got this D. The middle of the D here does not connect to anything. So if I'm going to cut with a D like this, I need to come back over and design a support for my D and a support for the D. Remember this, so just to remind you, this is the height. So I need to make this like 2 millimeters tall. So a little bit lower. And I can take this and I can set it right there. Now what am I doing? I'm making sure that there's a connector for the middle of the D. So watch this. So now I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to get my connector a little bit lower so it's kind of in the middle. And now I can select all. So I'll just select everything and I'll hit group. And so now I'm going to have my letters, but the middle of my D is going to have support. So now I've got my object created. I can go ahead and export it so that it can be used for printing. We've now done the design part. There are a lot of additional things you can do in terms of design. There are whole libraries of more shapes. You can in fact import images and do a process called extruding to make them into 3D objects. But those are more advanced topics than we deal with in this very first tutorial. So let's just start with this. We'll make a keychain. I'll click export. I want to save my file as a .stl file. A .stl file is a stereolithography file, and it's a 3D object file. So I'll click STL, and it's going to save it onto my computer and the downloads folder where I can get it later when I'm ready to print. Okay, so once you have your design ready to print, we have to go through the process of printing. So go to 3D Printer OS, so you'll plug in 3D Printer OS, and when you arrive at 3D Printer OS, you are able to submit your prints to our printers at KSU. So we'll click Start with 3D Printer OS, and it's going to prompt me to sign in. In this case, I'm actually going to sign in with an ID I've already created. But before I do that, you're just going to sign up, okay? And you'll sign up with your first name, last name, email. Use your KSU email here because it'll only allow you in to our printers with a KSU email, and then the password, and create the account. Once you have the account, then you sign in, and I'm going to sign in with a student account here. Here I am. You'll arrive and it will tell you that you have a certain number of automatic tutorial ducks that you can play with and print. You don't need those, they're just extra. The first thing you really need to do is add printers. So I'm going to come over here and click over here to this little button, click Add Workgroup Printers, and this is where you're going to add in the code that your faculty member has given you. So go ahead and do that now. After you add in the code, you should see a bunch of printers show up in your interface. And so now I can see I have a bunch of printers. I'm going to go ahead and sort them by the printer name, so there they are, and I can see they're in the Burris Building, room 465, and right now I can see that this one is printing. I can't see what the print job is. Some of them have cameras, some of them don't. So if I happen to be an online student, I might want to choose one of these camera printers so that I can see it running. Now that I have printers, this is important, I can now go back over to Files and I can find my file. So I'm going to go find my STL file from my Downloads folder. So let's go ahead and go to here's my file. I'm uploading it. Once it uploads, then I should see a picture of my design. If you don't see a picture here or it's black, it means that it didn't fully pick it up or the file wasn't quite well made, that kind of thing. It can't print yet. In order to print this thing, I have to slice it. So it gives me options, but I want you to just click the slice button. And when you click the slice button, it already knows the type of printer because we've added the printers. It knows to give us the KSU standard profile, which is optimized to make printing effective. We have our print on the print bed, that's good. The flat side is down, so that's all good for printing. Slicing is the process of splitting our object into layers because 3D printing prints layers. That's how it builds the 3D. It puts layers of plastic down. And in this case, we're just going to accept the default settings. There are some options, but these things start to become more important when you get more advanced. So now I'm just going to click slice. And what you see is it's turning this stereolithography file into a geometric code file. And it's suggesting that this particular print will cost about 5 cents and it will take about 16 minutes. So it's going to be pretty fast. It's giving me the option to print now, so you can go ahead once you have a file that's been sliced into a G-code file, click print, and now you can select your printer. So earlier, if you remember, we actually had a number of different color options in the palette in Tinkercad, but those colors will not be printed by these printers. The printers only print in the color that they have currently loaded, which you see listed along here with each printer. So you can choose a color you like and then go ahead and send your print. So let's say I like this red. I could click on printer 13. Now printer 13, notice it has a camera. I could add a note here about my design, and I don't have the ability to launch the print, so I'll have to wait for the lab assistants to do that for me. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Q, and it's going to put it in the queue for 13. When things start to happen, I'm going to get notified. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that looks like. A lab assistant will be looking at a screen like this. And the lab assistant can go in here and look for printer number 13. So here's printer number 13. And in this case, the build tray is clear. The lab assistant will click start. When the lab assistant clicks start, you'll get an email letting you know that your file has started. And then the result of your file as it prints will also be notified to you. So now if I go back over to my other account as a student and I look in here, I can go ahead and there we go. There's a little bit of detail. Let's see if we can see it on printer 13. So printer 13, I can go over here and see if I can load the camera. And I can see that the printer is starting to warm up and get itself ready. The bed of the printer is actually has to heat up, so the way this printer works is by melting plastic, so it has to get to a certain temperature. So I'll see these numbers go up as it heats up and gets ready. And what we saw happening with the print head here is that it's actually making sure that it's level. It's making sure that it's exactly level, because if it's not level, then the print won't stick to the bed correctly and there will be some error. That can happen. There are a lot of different tricks and tips, but for your first print, you don't have to worry about all that. We'll just go ahead and wait. If you're an online student, there's a form where you can request that your print be mailed to you. You can find it through your faculty member or on the 3D Lab website. If you are an in-person student, remember the color you printed on. Remember the name of your object. You will find these objects located in the lab, and you can come pick them up. You have an account with credits, so you don't have to worry about the cost for class. You're welcome to print more objects if you are interested and want to innovate and do more. We encourage you to do that. And you'll notice, by the way, that the temperatures have been going up. This one is almost ready to start printing, and very soon it will start printing. So with that, I want to encourage you to have fun and print and try new things, learn some new things. We have some more tutorials that you can find for more advanced designs. We've had students go on and invent new businesses through some of these technologies, and we hope that you will too. And enjoy the exploration and innovation. Take care.